Guys, this is probably going to be super rustly because I'm still wearing my coat. I haven't even taken my coat off. I just been for a walk on the common because I was feeling really like stuck and confused and overthinking this inner feeling that I had. Um, Almost like trying to ignore something. Do you ever get this feeling when it's something like in your heart? And I know this sounds woo woo, but it's almost like ignoring the things that make you feel joy and the things that make you feel excited because you are overthinking it and trying to run away from it and things like that. Um, so I just bumped into Edgar, which was really nice, and I was just vibing from listening to a really good podcast. And I wanted to sit down and start recording before I thought too much about what I wanted to say because I really want it to be authentic and it's not overthinking this creative process, right? I think we're all guilty of trying to perfect things and think about exactly what we're going to say, and sometimes it makes it less uh, spontaneous and less in the moment. So that is why I'm wearing a hat and I'm still wearing my coat and my nose is probably still bright red. Um, so I have been thinking about making a podcast episode and I wanted to do a bit of a reflection on the new year and 2025, um, and just revisiting this idea of what creativity is. Um, for people who have listened to the podcast for a little while, you'll all have heard me saying a million zillion times in a few different ways that the podcast is about creativity in Southampton and it's about all the different ways and different career paths that we can use to get into creativity, express our creativity, and things like that. Um, and today, sorry, I'm on my phone because I made some notes the other night on this episode, but I was still overthinking recording it. Oh, my nose is running and my stomach's rumbling, but it's fine. We're just gonna do this right now because otherwise I won't do it. It's procrastination. Oh, where's it gone? It's in my ideas list. Do, do, do. Oh, see, I'm already delaying the thing that I actually wanted to do. Um. Anyway, never mind. So I was listening. Firstly, I was on Pinterest, and all these books keep coming up. I don't know. I feel like I'm being told to read more or something. And this book had a really beautiful cover, and it was called "Women Living Deliciously." So I had a little look on Spotify to see if I could find an episode about it, and I just listened to a whole one, and it was on the Skinny Dipping podcast, I think it's called. I've never listened to it before, but it was on there. Um, and literally bumped into Edgar immediately after, mentioned it to him and sent it to him, and he's passing it on to someone else. So the power of these things. But it was all about women specifically and how we can sort of settle in our own power and do the things that bring us joy without feeling bad about it or feeling embarrassed or like we have to do things in a certain way for society to accept it and for it to be okay. Um, so that got me feeling really energized because, as I said, I've been overthinking some things that I've got going on personally. So I really wanted to reflect on the broadness of this topic of creativity in our lives, because I think so often we think of creativity as something that we do with our hands. Like, we take pictures, we paint, we draw, we are on the computer doing like design work or making new music, and all of these different things that involve our hands, and there's a product or a thing at the end. And I think, and this is part of the reason why it's called Inner Avenue, is life, your whole life can be an act of creativity, and you can engage in your creativity just by living. You, I think it's easy to forget that every day we make decisions that ultimately are steps in creating our life. It's almost like painting a picture, like every little brush stroke and movement and paint color you choose, or like the subject that you're painting and the way the light changes, all of these different things. And I think it's almost like an analogy of life and this big, broad picture, where we're engaging in the ability that we have and the power that we have to design our own reality, and the freedom that we have within ourselves to have ideas, and everything starts as a thought, and then you kind of, it amalgamates in your body where all these emotions and the bits of you and these memories live. Um, and the tools, like a paintbrush or an instrument or a camera or whatever, is helping you to bring this like essence as you of yourself out into the world, for there to be something that people can see and interact with, because it's very hard to know all of the things that are going on with the person. So hopefully this is making sense, because I haven't decided entirely what I want to say, but I don't know. I just really want to uh, reflect on this, especially as the new year comes in. Um, I think there are probably people who might listen to this podcast and don't necessarily count themselves as someone that I might be talking to, because they think for some reason that they're not a creative person. If anyone was at the RSA event a few weeks ago, I said something in my speech along the lines of, I don't like the way that we say uh, people were creative, or a person. Oh, that was a lunch rumble. A person is a creative, or is a creative person, because, and this is something that I truly, truly believe, is that everyone has the ability to be creative. Everyone is creative. It's just whether we're tapping into that energy and that kind of frequency of seeing things, the decisions that we make every day, as creative. It doesn't always have to, oh my gosh, it doesn't always have to be these traditional ways that we think someone's creative, because they can draw, or they can sculpt, or they're good with a camera, or they can make music, they can play an instrument. Every day you wake up, you're making very small and sometimes very big decisions, but they all contribute to who you are and how you navigate the world that day. Like, of all the things you could do, you choose the things that you're doing every single day. and also the people and things that you bring into your life. When I started this podcast, I never imagined that not only would I draw certain types of people and certain types of like energy towards me because of who I was and being myself. Oh my gosh, I really hope the microphone's not picking up all these rumbles, but it probably is because it's so close to my stomach. I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah, you bring all these people in just by being yourself. And I think this is another thing that people dull it down in themselves, or they forget, or they don't want to think about it, is everything that you are and all the knowledge and experience that you have is valuable as it is now. You don't need to wait until you have sold more of your things, or you're a signed music artist, or whatever it is. Because not only do you have to think about it in the sense of if you could go back however many years, it could be 5 years, it could be 1 year. If you could express the things that you know now, would they help past you? And I think for most people, it's yes, because you've changed, right? I think this element of change is the creativity. It's not the thing that you've made. It's this, it's the fact that you like kept going and you kept making small decisions at every single step, and you navigated the emotion and the tangible physical things that might have happened, events. And yeah, it's taking that power back really, and empowering ourselves in a way that feels right to us. There's not a right way to be creative. It can be any way that feels good to you. Like, be playful. And I think we lose that when we're adults. Even drawing and painting, I know we always go back to those examples, but they're the ones that come to my mind first. It's we don't always draw and paint for the fun of it. We want it to be good at the end and be worth putting it on the wall, or we have to. But we just put these limits in place. Like, is it gonna sell? Are other people gonna like it? Is it um my best work ever? Blah blah blah. Like, and we hide away the little parts of the process and the mistakes that we made and the things that we maybe wished we could rub out. And that's just something that I really try to do with these like more chatty bits of the podcast, and um these like videos on YouTube. This might also be an audio episode. I haven't decided yet. This will probably just be a video because I want to make the podcast episode a bit more like organized. But yeah, I hope I'm not talking in circles. But yeah, this is like a thought and an energy that I'm navigating at the moment as we go into the new year. And I felt like maybe I should express it because you never know who else it might help. Um, so yeah, if you wouldn't say you're a creative person, I would say to you to think like further about what you define as creativity and what you define as creative, and what are the traits and habits of people that you would define as creative? And also, if you don't think you're doing those things, why? Um, is it that they don't feel good to you and they're not your path? We all have different paths. That maybe is the case, but it doesn't mean that you're not creative. You don't have to be doing something in the exact same way as somebody else. Um, and I say this to people all the time about the podcast is every person is different. Every way that someone's gone into a creative like avenue is different because all the experiences that you have in life are different. You can't say one graphic designer is going to be the same as the other. Like, yes, their style will be different and that kind of thing, but also the way that they think about graphic design will be different. The way that they came into it will be different. The value uh, framework and I don't know, the like concept of graphic design that they've built up for themselves and in themselves will be different to other people. And I think there's real value to that. Um, it shouldn't feel like a box. Like if you don't think that way, then you're not a graphic designer. Um, Again, it's being. I feel like people say this all the time, but it really is being yourself and having the courage to do that. It's very hard. I find it really hard. I find it hard to sit here and speak out loud. And some people with that doesn't faze them. They'll think that's easy and not a big deal. But I don't find that easy. And I want to be honest about that because people will notice the development in the way that I communicate and the way that I speak throughout this process of creating the podcast. And that is my avenue into creativity now. It's collaborating with people through conversation and putting myself out there in a way that I never have. Um, and it does feel very vulnerable, but also in the past year, and I don't want to sound like I'm blowing my own trumpet right now, but as I said at the beginning and lost my train of thought, I never imagined that people would be so here for the ride. Like the people that have gathered around the community that the podcast has drawn in and the people that I've met. Like I I grew up in Southampton, as a lot of you will probably already know, and anyone who listened to the last YouTube video that I made in the realities of starting a podcast series. I grew up in Southampton. I left to go to like a different college to everyone else. I went off to uni, blah blah blah. But I came back and I didn't really know anyone in Southampton. And it wasn't until I followed this feeling and excitement and this joy in the idea of creating this podcast that these people started appearing. And honestly, it's been the most incredible thing. Like it does it doesn't sound like a big deal, like go out there and be yourself. Like all these cool people will appear. But and it's not just the people that have appeared, it's the way that I've now seen myself showing up in the world. Um, I feel almost like a different person. And just like today and yesterday around the Christmas break, where I've had some time to properly like be on my own and think about it, I was trying to think back over the last 5 years or so, where there's been so many versions and stages of me and trying to go back to that place and look at me now, but also looking at me now and looking back on like those past versions of me. And the change is so massive that I can't actually even describe it. And it's one of these things, and I still feel it now. Like, part of me is scared, but I'm also so excited and willing to take the risk of like keeping it going and keeping it going further. Because the things that have come this year, I couldn't have imagined. And I'm just like, oh, I wonder what else will come out of it. And I really hope that people like putting that energy out there will help other people. Um, so anyone who follows me on Instagram probably saw a review that I posted. I posted it as a post, but I always also put it on stories. And it was this really lovely review, and I thought it would be a bit funny to not tell people who it was from. Um, and this is another wild thing that's come out of creating the podcast is, so this person left a review and we hadn't really touched base or spoken in a good decade, I think. And when we did know each other was probably, and I never told them this, but it was probably one of like the worst periods of my life. Just really struggling with things, navigating who you are as like 17, 18. It's just a shit time anyway. But I was just having a particularly difficult time. Um, and and I digress. They left this really lovely review, so unexpected and so sweet and vulnerable and honest. And I was just thinking how weird it must be. Well, it's weird for me, but it must be weird for them as well to listen to me talking now and being so open. Because that was something I really struggled with at that time, and we didn't really know each other in that way either. Um, and to hear me talk about things I'm doing and I don't know, like sharing my perspective, um, it's not often that you get to touch base with someone who knew a version of you that long ago and is so different to the version of you now. I always think this with music as well. Like, if you wrote a song 10 years ago and you have to keep performing it, it happened a couple of years ago. I actually bumped into this person at this gig, so this is weird to have suddenly thought of this. But so I went to see the Arctic Monkeys when they came to Southampton, and I could not believe that they were coming to Southampton. They're like a massively famous and well-known band, but obviously I went with my stepdad and my mum, which was incredible to go to a gig with them. That was the first proper time I've gone somewhere to see music with them, even though my stepdad was a music journalist, so they went to a lot of gigs and festivals and stuff when I was growing up. Um, so we were at this Arctic Monkeys gig, saw this person there. I was like a bit shell shocked, I'm not gonna lie, because I kind of forgotten that they existed, and that sounds really mean and horrible, but I don't mean it in that way. I just mean like I don't know, like life had just moved on so much, and you just don't necessarily think about people that like played a small part in your life a long time ago. So it's a different chapter. But anyway, bumped into this person there. We didn't actually talk. And then this person so happened to be like covertly listening to the podcast. I didn't know they were listening to it. Um, and then I posted the episode on the colorism events. And that was probably the first episode that I've done solo, other than these like ramblings that I like to record. Um, where I really felt very vulnerable talking openly about these events that I'd gone to. And that was when they sent this review. And it was just like jarring, but also so magical. And it just goes to show that you don't know necessarily who's listening to you or watching what you're doing and things like that. But it's pretty incredible to think that there's someone out there being inspired by this person that you've managed to create and become. Um, and it just goes to show the change that I was talking about before. Um, you have to allow life to happen. Um, I think that's where the real inherent creativity comes from. And I think that's the creativity that we often forget about. Um, it's just, it becomes part of the mundane. And to be able to start seeing that playful, all encompassing joy and connecting with our bodies in a different way. Like it's not just hands, like I said before, it's speaking something out. So it starts as an internal thought or an idea or an emotion. And it's not until you say it out loud that you put it out into the world. It's like painting with your voice. Like your voice is like this incredible instrument, and it's something that I've really learned to appreciate and value over the last year, but even before that as well through other experiences. And I think this is something that I'd really like to do with the podcast in maybe the next series or the series after that, because I have got people that want to come on. So I need to get organized with that. But talking to people who are creating in different ways with like a series about like the tools that everyone has. So whether it's voice, hands, uh, or just like the five senses, I guess. I don't know. I'll flesh that one out, but it's something that I've been thinking about. So yeah, I really, for 2025, I really, if you're still listening to this, I really just want to put this feeling and vibe out there because I've personally been really struggling with following the feeling and leveling up, and it's scary in losing this familiarity. I think at each stage you get to, you get familiar and comfortable with your environment and the people you have around and these like small certainties. And I think to step out beyond those, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And unless you say yes to opportunities and listen to this inner feeling and inner knowing, you can't navigate these different roads that you might go down. And I think this is really integral to Inner Avenue. And I guess it's this spiritual aspect of being creative and this inherent creativity. And what I mean by inherent creativity is the tools and skills that we all have. Like we can all talk, we can all use our hands, we can all feel our feelings. So it's just like not trying to see the end point all the time, um, and allowing yourself to be surprised. So that's what I hope for all of us listening and all of us in Southampton and further afield, that we'll be able to allow this life to flow through us rather than always trying to navigate these dams and little roads that we're building. It's like a river. I feel like I'm getting a bit too woo woo, but I'm just trying to follow my thinking and speaking it out loud rather than planning what I'm going to say. Is but it's like building a river. Well, you don't build a river, sorry. So you have man-made rivers and lakes and stuff, but you end up having to build structures and fortifying these rivers to keep them in this shape and being this thing that you want it to be. Whereas when you allow water to flow, it creates its own paths and its own little solutions. It's like a holistic thing. It's not just water just doesn't just run in one direction for no reason. It's always there's always something else that feeds into it, and it's almost allowing your following your joy to be like that. Like you might start creating a little path and you're like, no, that doesn't quite feel quite right. So I'm going to go off this way. And that's not wrong. That's not a mistake. That's you journeying and navigating and tuning into your own feelings and allowing them to be expressed. Um, and this is something that I've been finding in my own relationship as well since starting the podcast. And I think this is something I don't think I've ever heard people talking about this. So I've been in a 4-year relationship, so 4.5 years. And I started this podcast like 3 years into that. I really wanted to just try this thing. Like I had this idea and I was like, talked to my friends about it and everyone was really supportive and blah, blah, blah. So the podcast started and I feel like as a result of following that feeling that I was talking about and allowing these little streams and rivers to happen in my life, I've unexpectedly found this confidence um, and like inner knowing. But at the same time, it almost feels like when there's another person involved, as much as you want these things to happen together, when you really tune into yourself, and I think this is the best way to enrich your relationship, but it also means that sometimes you start off on a path and you're like two little canoes or something, but you build up momentum and sometimes you start getting ahead of this person when you're focusing on your own path. And I'm all about, I've always, well, in a previous long term relationship, I really lost myself in that person and I wasn't navigating life on my own terms. I felt like I was kind of following this other person around. And I really built up a lot of self confidence, but even more so by doing this podcast and meeting new people and making new friends and new connections and learning new things about myself. And I feel like people don't talk about what happens when you do that. People talk about, I want to manifest this relationship and this is what I want it to bring me and blah, blah, blah. But people don't talk about what happens when you focus on yourself in a relationship and how that changes the path of the relationship. Like for me at the moment, I find the feeling of excitement and joy when I think about continuing with the podcast because that's already led to a lot of things. And I have this inner feeling that I need to keep going. But I'm also aware that this momentum has had me kind of outpacing my partner in a way and feel a bit of a disconnect there. So I'm trying to navigate at the moment how much I allow, like, what is the balance of being in a relationship and steering your own course? Like, at what point have you left that person behind? And if you have done, do you stop? and look back and wait for them? Or do you say, you know, I'm really uh like commandeering my own ship. I'm really on this path and I really need to continue it on. And sometimes you could be in a great relationship where somebody gives you your own space and allows that to happen. And but sometimes that's not the case, and either way is fine. So yeah, it's like a conversation. It's like the podcast. Like I never know which direction somebody else's thought process is going to take us. I can plan and I can make notes as I do, but somebody might say something unexpected, or there might be like a little thread that pulls out of this like rope that we're weaving together. And sometimes it makes the conversation even better. And sometimes sometimes the wavelength is gets disjointed. Sometimes it's hard to tap back into the thought process and like vibe with that other person. And sometimes we find it while we're creating work as well. Sometimes you might be, and I remember James talking about this in season one, James Salo, uh, when he was talking about, you know, creating a painting because he was doing his art exhibition. And he was talking about when you overwork a painting and it flips from being creative to it being destructive. But it's not always a bad destructive. It's like a transformation, and creativity and destruction are just parts of this process. So yeah, I wanted to talk about it because, as I said, and I know I'm going round in circles, I'm doing my Buddy the Elf thing. It's this inherent creativity of participating in life. And once you hop on this little creativity train, it starts impacting on different parts of your life. Like I never, I didn't think, and this sounds stupid now, but I didn't think that the podcast would have any impact on my personal, like romantic relationships. But it has, because I'm changing as a person as a result and evolving. And the conversations that I've had with people from the very beginning of this, I am like a secret spiritual person, secret spirituality, if that's a thing. It's something very internal, and I didn't necessarily used to talk to people about it for fear of like embarrassment, shame. I come across people who are a bit like, mm. um, and they didn't want to hear about it, and I'm like, it depends on how they do it. Sometimes I'm like, that's cool, or sometimes it's met with real negativity. Um, but the fact that it's come up in these conversations that I want to have with people that inspire me and I'm interested in, and we like have this little vibe going on, like it's always enhanced those conversations and brought a real like mean meeting of minds. Um, so I'm thinking maybe in the new year, as the podcast evolves and Inner Avenue evolves and grows as a brand, maybe I stop trying to take that side out of it. Because I started to feel going into this new year that it is an important part of creativity. And I don't know what else you would call tuning into this inner like like swirly whirly paint mixture of like feeling and wishes, and I don't know, I like to think of it as like, do you remember those like uh slinky weird like squishy things, and they had the glittery water in them? It's almost like that. It's like as soon as you tried to like grab it, it would like it's just like, I don't know. It had like, it was like a tube filled with water, but it had like an inside so you could shove your hands in it and stop it moving. But if you held onto it, it would like come alive. It would, like you're trying to catch it because it keep every time you grab it, it would like stretch forward, if that makes sense. Um, it's probably like a 90s kid thing, I don't know, but it just feels like that at the moment. This magical juice inside and allowing it to be liquid and be watery and expressing yourself without feeling like you have to hide away. Um, so yeah, I hope that this makes sense. And I'm getting cold now, getting like ooh, weird little shivers. So I don't know what that's about. But yeah, I'm just gonna allow me and Inner Avenue and things to evolve. Um, and I hope that you might be inspired to follow that feeling, that little niggle that I think everyone has somewhere inside, and find the people who support you as you take the steps towards it. Um, whether you're ready to have conversations about it or not, I think you'll know in yourself. But if you are ready, like find a way to express that. You need, I think, community is a really, really important part of creativity, not just listening to yourself, but also being around people who support you and listen to you. And you probably inspire without necessarily feeling like you're being inspiring. Um, and people that allow you to change and grow, and people that are willing to grow with you. Um, I think and I'm certainly guilty of this at times, of being scared of change. But I think you have to believe that everything is working out for you and things are happening in the best way that they can, but also that you're the creator in all of this. Um, yeah, so I'm going to stop talking because I feel like I could just meander down this little stream that I've started creating for a long time. But if you take away an action from this, uh, yeah, I really want to keep documenting these little moments because if I could see every part of someone creating something and following their inner feelings earlier, I think maybe it would have given me the courage to have started sooner. And I don't regret not starting sooner. But I think, like, we all just have so much power that we don't even realize that we have. And I think you have to get comfortable with allowing that power to, like, manifest. You're creating it in your life and allowing it in your life, but you also almost give people permission to have it in their own life and see it happening for somebody else and believe it can happen for them. Yeah, don't stop.